Has the market changed its mind about what the Fed may do next?
Chairman Paul Volcker put it at the height of the great inflation in 1979.
Okay. Hello, welcome back. I'm Christopher Crystal with Stockholm Finance, and as we discussed on Friday, FedEx had come out with their figures a little bit early and was somewhat negative on their forecasting, which set the trend for the rest of the market. So we saw markets going down overall in the United States and globally. We're seeing a little hesitancy and cautious investing today. In the morning, it was mostly down. And I would not expect really any more positive news coming forward that would really lift the markets. Last week, we did see the transportation issue, logistic issue partially resolved. So you have a tentative settlement regarding the railroads. But with FedEx adding on, saying that globally, they're not seeing the shipping trends that they saw before. And this is on the back of what they produced in May, the 31st, where they gave an 11% increase in revenues. They're a 93 billion plus company in revenues, and they're not seeing the shipping and freight as they expected. Also, what's a little unsettling is if you look at their logistics chain and the amount of small businesses involved in them, they have something like a 70% exposure. So if smaller shippers in the US are not able to work with them, and we've seen a lawsuit there already locally for them in Tennessee, and if the trend would continue because the issue became a question over wage cost, we have those figures coming out on Thursday on not for FedEx but for the United States overall, where we see the increase of employment costs for the customer or the company, what they have to pay, and we'll get those figures. We'll also get some producer price issues globally, so we'll see some of that developing here over the week, which will add on to what FedEx said last week. And with FedEx, you saw a number of the European companies like Deutsche Post, you saw DHL, you saw CMA in France, Deutsche Post, DHL, of course, being German, and then CMA being in France. And then you see DSV, one of the Danish companies. Keeping an eye on Baltic freight rates will also be important. So these companies continue to be in focus right now. And the real key here is energy, of course. This is nothing, that's not obvious, but the energy and the inflation costs are continuing to weigh on the markets. And with the United States government and the Fed saying that they're going to be increasing the interest rates in order to curb the inflation, which has a 2% inflation target in the US and Europe. The ECB has a 2% inflation target, and the latest trend showing over 8%, 8.8 in the US was the reading that we got. And then in Europe, you saw something like 9.8. And then you have countries like Sweden, where we're over 6% on inflation rates, and then countries in the Baltics experiencing a very high rate. So those that are bordering on Russia and were previously part of the Soviet Union are showing some of the highest rates of inflation. And really, to understand the effect of the inflation really describes the money pool that is produced by these bank organizations, so like the Fed and the ECB, and their production of either euros or dollars and flooding it into the system is inflating the system. And then that's reflected into the cost for the consumer. But that's really because your currency is no longer buying as much as it used to. And so when people think about inflation, they think about the inflated prices they're paying. But really what it is the inflated money flow or money pool that has been created. And until that is contracted through raising rates and purchasing back, you will not have real inflation reduction. And as the cost of energy continues to increase, Europe is looking at several different plans. In Sweden over the weekend, it came out that they were talking about a lower cost or a lower tax on the fuel costs. So both for gasoline and for diesel, although you still have a majority or a large percentage of cars in Sweden sold that are diesel, you have most of the businesses using diesel. So even a rebate would be good, You may not see it for any time coming because in Sweden, we just had our elections and we still don't have a government coalition formed. And there's still a lot of debate about how that coalition would look. In Europe, you've seen the elections in Germany, you've seen them down in France, and you saw similar swings to the political homeless. I think it's better to call it that than the right or the left. Many of the people are tired of what their politicians are doing and not fulfilling and saying that they would fulfill, but doing something differently. And so this is why we're seeing these swings in voting blocks and why, again, polls are really very difficult to trust. So the overall picture within the market based on FedEx being the barometer for global business does not look very good. Rates will, of course, as I already said, continue to increase. And I think areas that you could look for, which might show some positive growth and could shine lights, would be, say, the pharmaceuticals. You have, of course, the approach is to treat the cancer rather than to treat the issue that caused the cancer and avoid maybe that kind of lifestyle. So these continue to get good looks. You see the WHO came out this weekend discussing how they would like to see the world addressing artificial sweeteners, saying that maybe artificial sweeteners are not so good, which is about time. And if you just take something like aspartame, which was in the US, which caused a number of cancers in rats and continued tumor growth, it would probably be better to avoid it than take the risk of running into cancer. And and remember this, the correlation very strong between cancer rate growths and the standard westernized diet. And even if you look at something like sunscreen, when you look at the rates of cancer growth, they're not slowing down, despite the fact that the public consumer is abiding by the goals that they're or desired goals by these agencies that are issuing them. So even when they're telling people lower your meat consumption, you're still getting cancers and you're getting more prostate cancers. When you're saying to people avoid the sun, you're still getting skin cancer rates, despite the fact that you see the sunscreen blocks going up in sales. So it's difficult to pinpoint where the cancer is coming from because the studies are mostly epidemiological, but the issue still isn't really being addressed. Like, what's really causing the issue? Can we look at that and try to eliminate these factors that would cause it? So while that's being done, you'll see the pharmaceuticals developing drugs to fight these new diseases, or pharmaceuticals being developed to have vaccines to fight more viruses. And as the consumer starts to take them, that's generated or guaranteed revenue, the way they've set up this model on the COVID, where you have to get a booster, just like they did with the flu and the boosters. But we still have these viruses running around. So we had, forget which virus corona number it was for the flu, and then we've had corona 19 because it was the 19th discovered. So you will see a continued development in this type of program. So if you can find vaccine producers, just look at the profits they reeled in, you continue to see profits in those markets. Something else I think is of interest is the cryptocurrencies, which had been a haven for many people to invest in to avoid the problems with the banking systems or to avoid the legislations and regulations of different governments. It became, of course, a way for a lot of people to do illegal things. But I think when you look at this environment where you have an increased energy cost and the cost that it required to run these cryptocurrencies through the secrecy and through the contact through the blockchain and the energy needs for that, that will also act to stifle the enthusiasm for the cryptocurrencies. But what you're also seeing is introduction of more and more regulation concerning cryptocurrencies. And that brings you to the digital dollar debate. Why doesn't the US go digital? And if you see the comments from Biden this weekend about discussions for a cryptocurrency platform or cryptocurrency treatment by the regulators, I think this will further stifle the growth that we've seen. And so I wouldn't say cryptos would be somewhere to go. I've never been a fan of them, but you can make money off the blockchain. And there you also saw in Europe discussions about more regulations for the security of the networks. So these companies continue to do well, and maybe we can go into some of those again later. But so it looks like strong headwinds in the market will continue for some time. So be very selective in what you're looking at and research these companies. So thank you very much for your time, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.